Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Rutter. I'm a master's student at Oxford and I completed a micro internship for TVERC back in December. My work involves using GIS analysis to identify historic butterfly strongholds in Oxfordshire and Berkshire, as well as local sites of conservation potential. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to be focusing on the latter of these objectives. To start with some background, local wildlife sites are areas of ecological and public significance administered at the county level. Designating one of these areas requires scientific evidence to be weighed against pre-established criteria. And many of these criteria are species specific. So for that reason, I focused my analyses on 3 species of butterfly. These were the dark green fritillary, the Duke of Burgundy, and the small blue. Here was my central research question. What are potential areas for new local wildlife sites that could contribute to conservation of these species? Today, I'm going to focus specifically on the dark green fritillary, but I use the same methodology for all 3 species. My approach was inspired by the concept of strategic conservation planning. Basically, I started with a map of habitat patches. I decided what variables were especially valuable for conservation of the species. I gave these variables a score, I added up the scores in each patch, and then I identified the patches with the highest scores. I did all of this through the model builder feature of ArcGIS Pro using datasets and shapefiles provided to me by TVERC. Now I'll go into each of these steps in a little bit more detail. First, I limited my sites to habitat types in which the dark green fritillary was observed in the past 10 years. And I assigned a score for habitat quality based on the literature for that species. And that gave me this map of habitats, which you can see here in green, with each patch containing a quality score. I then narrowed these patches down to those that had at least one record of a species preferred food plant in the past 10 years. And I gave more points to patches with more food plants. Because my objective was to find areas for potential new local wildlife sites, I next wanted to eliminate patches that are already protected. But I also wanted to prioritize patches that are in close proximity to protected areas, because these have the potential to serve as habitat corridors. So if we imagine that these circles here are habitat patches, I eliminated those that were already protected, and I gave more points to those near protected areas. Next, I prioritized patches with dark green fritillary records from the past 10 years. So as you can see here, I gave more points to patches with butterflies on site or within dispersal range. Finally, I gave extremely high weight to areas that met TVERC's local wildlife site selection criteria. In this case, that was any patch with a single record of 20 or more dark green fritillary individuals. So to recap, I started with a dataset of habitat patches and I narrowed it down to just a few patches that could be good candidates for local wildlife site designation. I did this by assigning points to each patch based on habitat quality, presence of food plants, proximity to protected areas, proximity to butterflies, and fulfillment of local wildlife site criteria. I then ranked these patches by score and area. And what that gave me was a table of sites that could be good candidates for local wildlife site designation, ranked by their conservation value for the dark green fritillary. And this is how that same table looks on a map. So what you can see here is that the high value sites are somewhat spread out across Oxfordshire and Berkshire. And I was able to apply the same methodology to produce a similar map for the other species I studied, which were the Duke of Burgundy and the small blue. So having looked at these rankings, I'd like to end with a couple key takeaways. First, there are many currently undesignated habitat patches that might support viable butterfly populations. And these could be good sites for future monitoring effort and consideration as future local wildlife sites. Second, this study represents a possible GIS-based methodology for identifying areas for potential future conservation designation. Even if some conservation managers disagree with the criteria and scores I have assigned to different habitats, they may be able to employ a similar approach to assign their own valuations with the same data. And that's all I've got for today. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend the live Q&A session. I do apologize, but please feel free to email me if you have any questions or if you'd like to take a look at the full report. Thanks very much.